Hello everybody. Welcome to our Buddhist School's first online Wesak. Our very first online celebration of Wesak, the thrice blessed day in the Buddhist calendar.
In our first online Vesak, and thank you Bodhidasa for initiating at the start of our Vesak online. Today I'm going to speak to you roughly about the significance of Vesak at Pal Buddhist School. And the Vesak Day, what marks the Vesak Day for every Buddhist around the world is what you're looking at, which is the full moon, the brilliant bright full moon of May. Right? I will explain in more details about the picture or about this picture at the end of my talk, hopefully. So that's the question that many people ask. What is the significance of Vesak Day for most Buddhists around the world? I'm pretty sure you would be familiar with the Buddha's life or the Buddha. I hope that you all know that his name before he became known as the Buddha was Siddhartha Gautama. That was his worldly name. It started off when he was first born in about the 6th century BC. That's about 550 years before Jesus was born. And he was born into a kingdom, of course. His family was royalty. And as he grew up, he learned many skills at his temple. And Siddhartha just couldn't find the satisfaction in life because he witnessed so much suffering every day, even though his parents, his father in particular, tried to ensure that his life will experience not much difficulty. So his father made effort to, for example, remove all the sick people from the town that he was in. His father made 3 beautiful palaces for him to stay in and full of beautiful entertainers, young and energetic. No old people were around him. But despite all that, he still experienced a great suffering as a human being. So, not satisfying with his ordinary life, he decided to leave his wife, his beautiful wife Yasodhara, and his son Rahula, who was just born at the time he decided to leave the household life, to renounce. And he went on searching, of course, and so on, cutting his hair, searching for the answer to end the suffering that were experienced by human beings. And what's unique about this Vesak Day, or this full moon day of May, is that when he was born on the full moon of May. And in his search and his struggle to search for enlightenment, he actually found enlightenment on the full moon of May as well. And he also passed away on his 80th year on the full moon of May. So the full moon of May is an auspicious day for most Buddhists around the world for that. So most Buddhists would be commemorating. They'd be coming together to respect, to remember the values and the qualities of the Buddha. Okay, so they have a certain activities which they do. We can call them rituals, we can call them rites. But many Buddhists at this point, just like the Christians come together in Christmas time or Easter time to celebrate the birth of Jesus and the death of Jesus respectively, the Buddhists do the same. Then the question is, what do we do at Pal Buddhist School on Vesak Day? And some of the things we did last year and the year before. Read the suttas, the teaching from the Buddha. We make offerings of flowers, as you saw earlier, lighting up candles, incense, and sometimes we put fruits for the Buddha. We offer meal, clothing, and medicine to the Sangha, which is the order of the monastic. Right? We also ask our students to cook meals for their parents. And we also ask our students to wash the parents' feet. These are some of the activities that we do at Power Buddhist School. And I guess the frequently asked question that we receive from many people, parents, students, teachers, and friends of the school. So what is the Buddhism that we teach at school? How do we commemorate Buddhism, the Vesak ceremony, and what is the significance of Vesak in the school context? And I hope to be able to explain to you this in a clearer form today. Okay, so firstly, let's get one thing straight. We're a school of scientific methodology, as well as a school of spiritual seeking. What does that mean? Well, scientific method or methodology means that we seek to understand knowledge in the outer world. Right? In the modern world, most schools are set up to understand knowledge in the outer world. Okay, so that is us being a scientific school. What do we mean by a school of spirituality? Well, it means that we are a school that encourages students to seek to understand their inner mind. We invite students, teachers, parents to seek to understand the working of the inner mind. See, just like, I guess, a quick example, if you look at a computer, it's a classic case of where the scientific advancement allows us to invent something like a computer. Most people attempt to learn about the computer by looking at it outside their understanding. And then the designer of the computers are busy looking inside the computer, the working of the computer, so that they can actually improve the use or the purpose of the computer to serve human beings. So seeking spirituality is the same way as the engineer seeking to understand the internal working of a computer so that they can enhance their ability to serve others or to make the computer more useful or to be in control of the computer. So the seeking part to understand the inner is to actually understand who we are. That's roughly about what we do as a school. So when you look at when you listen to what some of the things we did just then, for example, washing feet of the parents or teachers, or offering flowers to a stone Buddha, one may ask, what are the benefits? Are there any fruits from these practices? Or are they just empty ritualistic practice without any result? I hope that I'll be able to show you today what are some of the benefits and the fruits that are intended. Firstly, we aim to nourish in these activities gratitude. Okay, and we aim to nourish in students respect. Third, we aim to nourish generosity. And fourth, we aim to nourish humility, which I think these aspects Bodhisattva mentioned briefly before as well. It's not limited to these four, but for the sake of clarity and simplicity, today I'm only going to focus on these main four. These are the main four that we focus on every Vesak occasion. Okay, but there are many other qualities that we cultivate: selfless joy, compassion, loving kindness. But let's have a look at these four qualities. We aim to nourish them in the students, right? These qualities should be possessed or owned by the students for the respect of the seniors. And the seniors are the monastics, the monks and the nuns. For the wise, for the parents, for their teachers. And their teachers can be the teachers at school. For most students, Their teachers are those teachers. Their teachers could be their coaches in music lesson, their coaches in sports, right? Or their advisor, which is like the wise, somebody else like an uncle, an auntie, or friend, a family friend, or someone who advise you on the right way of living. Those are the wise. So that's what we aim to nourish in our students: gratitude, respect, generosity, and humility for the seniors. And we want to de-nourish in the students the 4 qualities, which are pretty much the opposites of what we want to nourish. We want to de-nourish their ungratefulness, their disrespect, their greed, their egotistic pride. Because we strongly believe that if our students have these 4 qualities, it is the biggest hindrance to their learning. It is the biggest hindrance to the machinery called a human being body. It will hinder their success in life. And today I am going to try to speak to you in a more unconventional Buddhist way, I guess. I'm going to try and explain to you how we do this from a different perspective. Okay, so to appreciate our intention, let's consider an analogy. Let's step out of the normal, typical Buddhist talk and into the world of life. Anybody know his name? I hope everybody know who this man is, right? Something. This man, his name is Steve Jobs. I'm sure most people know. Is he famous? Is he respected? If so, what for? Okay, so why does the world respect Steve Jobs? I think we all know. He's the founder, he's the inventor, the creator, even though he may not design every chip on the iPhone, He also introduced the Macintosh. He introduced the iPod, iTunes, which changed the way we listen to music forever. The iPhone changed the way we communicate in the world forever. Maybe you students are too young to remember back in the 90s. I grew up, well, I wasn't growing up, I was in uni when the mobile phone first came out, and it was about the size of a brick, and it was about $15,000 per phone. And then they got smaller, but when they got smaller, they got phones that are like, not this small, but roughly this small, and they had keyboards on it, buttons on it. So Steve Jobs was the first guy to create a phone that had no button, and everybody didn't believe in that. Okay, now you know what happened. You're the generation of the buttonless phone, the smartphone. The iPad. How is the iPad a world changer in terms of computing? Well, it allowed education or delivery of knowledge to almost everybody around the corner of the globe at the touch of a finger. Right? So that's Steve Jobs. And don't forget, there's one other thing he introduced: pizza. Anybody ever watch Toy Story, the movie? The animated CGI stuff. Now Hollywood is all about CGI. Well, it started from this man. Okay, so why does the world respect him? I don't need to say anymore, do I? I think you can understand why. So let's have a look a bit. I'm going to make this comparison. I know a lot of Buddhists is probably going to try and jump at me right now for comparing Steve Jobs to the Buddha. Both men were born with great purposes. The Buddha was born roughly about 563 BC. Steve Jobs, 1955. Not too long ago, in your realm. Both had great purpose in their life. Were their visions? It's interesting to study their vision. If you look at Siddhartha before he became the Buddha, his vision was quite simple. When he left his wife and Rahula, his newly born son to go and search. What was he searching for? He was searching for an answer to fulfill his vision. And his vision was simple. It was to find a path to end suffering for all humanity. Now let's look at Steve Jobs' vision. This is, you can actually Google this. You go and check Apple's vision, and this is what you'll find. To make a contribution to the world by making tools for the mind that advance humankind. I want you to think a little bit. Is there any similarity in these two visions? Is there any similarity between the two visions? Well, let's have a look at some similarities between the two visions. Can you see that both have aimed to service humanity? Alternate. It's meant to say alleviate. Both aim to alleviate suffering in life. I think you would appreciate Steve Jobs' aim a lot more, because I think you definitely can appreciate how much faster, how much more convenient life has become with the Apple phone, with the iPad, with iTunes, way in which we listen to music. We can access a whole album of music, like millions of songs now, in our little pocket. The Buddha's aim, of course, is to alleviate people's suffering. Short. The other commonality between them is the betterment of the quality of life. To make the quality of life better. Can we summarize these three common values in their vision? Can you see that they are aiming to try to lessen the suffering in people's life? Without a computer, life is a lot more difficult. Understand? So there are similarities between these two great people. Now, let's have a look. Both the Buddha and Steve Jobs had billions of followers. I'll leave you to think about which billion is bigger, the Buddha's billion or Steve Jobs' billion, right? The Buddha was some 2,500 years ago, and now, even now, around the world, you have people, monks, who dress in the ochre robe in millions, learning, practicing from his teaching. And you remember the picture on the right? I'm not sure if you're old enough to remember the days when the lines were long, people put their tents to wait and buy the iPhone. The two men have similar impacts on humanity, isn't that right? You're probably still wondering where I'm going, and people out there who are Buddhists probably screaming at me right now, but please forgive me, be patient, you'll see my good intention soon. What were some of the noble attributes they both shared? One, both men were not concerned about their personal material gain. I know. Some of you might say, no, I'm wrong. Steve Jobs, a greedy man. He blocked everybody out so that he can make Apple the richest company in the world. No, if you read Steve Jobs and you understand him carefully, he was not set out. He did not set out to become the richest man. In fact, he did say, there's a statement there, he says, don't do it for the money. I never did it for the money, he said. And he said, it's not about being the richest man in the grave. Something like that. All right? I know, I'm making a comparison to the Buddha, who was a prince, who had it all, more than Steve Jobs had when he started his life. And the Buddha gave it all up, renounced, walked out of that palace, into the jungle, into the wilderness, to seek that answer because he realized that in the worldly life it's too noisy for him. It made his mind too scattered to think about what he needs to see in order to understand or to find a solution to end the suffering that human beings experience. So both men did not care about material. One, of course, was more resolute than the other. I'll leave you to think who it is. The second common traits that they had was they did not concern themselves wanting to be famous. I know it's hard for you to visualize the Buddha. We don't even have a photograph of the Buddha. All I can present to you is a painting, an imagination by an artist of what the Buddha will look like. But you all know what Steve Jobs looked like. And in fact, if I ask anyone to visualize Steve Jobs' fashion, can you see it in your head yet? Pair of jeans and turtleneck or black t-shirt. For a man who made a company that reached the first $1 trillion mark, he wore a simple turtleneck, black, skivvy, is that what they call them? Or?
Yes.
Let me just call it turtleneck, all right. And a pair of jeans. So you can see that would be the marking of a man who does not care about the fame he got. They did not indulge in selfish joy. What does that mean? A word that can replace selfish joy is basically happiness. Most people seek happiness. Happiness is actually a form of selfish joy. And because of that, I think Steve Jobs in your generation was accused of being a very difficult man to be around, because he didn't consider the happiness of other people, because he was considering a greater purpose. He was considering the happiness of more people, and he had to bring his team to try and build the best product that made an impact to humanity. And in the same way, the Buddha and his Sangha was never chasing for happiness for themselves. They were trying to end the sufferings of people, and as a result, they got a different type of happiness. And this is what Steve Jobs said in terms of selfish joy. He said, going to bed at night saying we've done something wonderful, that's what matters to me. Think about that kind of statement for a guy who changed the world. You know, in some way, somewhat, you are the recipient of Steve Jobs in terms of the way in which you receive your online education, your offline education. The irony is, despite the fact that they don't want all those, they got it all. Did they go out there and gain it for themselves, or was it put to them by the people? Was it given to them by the people? Think about that. Fame they got, gain they got, selfless joy they got. Let me just pause back a little bit for a second. I recall that the Buddha's father, when he first saw Siddhartha, came back to him after 6 years, 5 years, I think 6 years of being away from home, renouncing, and his father heard that he was coming back to his hometown. But this time Siddhartha Gautama came back as the Buddha, and his father see the Buddha as still Siddhartha Gautama, his son. And when he went to the town, the Sakya kingdom, the Sakya town, the Buddha noticed his son in the distance wearing an orange robe, standing by, looking as if though in his father's eyes he was begging for food. But in the Buddha's tradition, he was standing there, giving the opportunity to do good. He was giving the opportunity for people to practice generosity. And the Buddha's father said to him, when he approached the Buddha, he said, "Son, what are you doing? You are letting me down." And this is not these are my words, my interpretation, so it's not a quote. "You're letting me down. This is not our lineage, son. We are royalties. We do not beg for food." So this is when the king observed, thinking that his son has gone poor, has gained nothing. And the Buddha at that point replied, "Father, that is your lineage, royalty. My lineage of Buddhahood is this." Little does the father realize that the Buddha had already had thousands, if not millions of people following him, even though he had no money, no material wealth. So the Buddha's father, King Suddhodana, realized that his son became richer than him, left the palace, renounced all the material values as a prince, and he became a greater prince, the prince of the people. So he gained a lot. The Buddha gained selfless joy, a happiness that is beyond the happiness that the average lay people obtain by pursuing for happiness. They both gained reputation. So the question, did their followers or fans, disciples, who showed them gratitude, who showed them respect, who showed them generosity, who showed them humility, did they achieve anything? Did they gain any fruits? To both disciples of the Buddha and fans of Steve Jobs. I want you to think about, who are the fans of Steve Jobs? Is it just the ordinary user, students, householders? Yeah, that's one. You can think about that. Those people who respect Steve Jobs, those students, those people who buy, the consumers, that's one fan. Who else are the fans of Steve Jobs that are not ordinary people? And did they gain anything? Let's have a look. On the right, we have Samsung. I know, you've probably seen many legal suits between Apple and Samsung, but let me tell you, Samsung is a clear fan of Apple because they were the company who were inspired by Apple's innovation. Unlike Nokia, Sony Ericsson, Motorola, who did not respect Apple or Steve's thinking, who had no humility for it. They did not look to copy, right? So Samsung venerating, can I use the word venerating, as if you are venerating a monk or a Buddha, right? Or a wise person. Because they had such a high respect for Apple, Steve Jobs, they set their mind to learn what Apple or what Steve Jobs did. So as a result, from 1990 to the year 2000 and something, Nokia almost went bankrupt. So Sony Ericsson, I think, is gone. Motorola is still struggling to come back. And Samsung became the second most influential phone maker in the world. This is because they had the four values for Apple, for Steve Jobs. I'm now showing you a corporation. I'm not talking about individuals anymore. The next company that is parallel to Samsung is Huawei, a Chinese company that also respects Apple. And I think you know their story. Quite successful, right? Now, what is this man here, Gandhi, doing here? Gandhi was a man, of course he was not a Buddhist, but he was a Hindu. But Hindu values are very similar to what the Buddhists taught. And Gandhi himself had a very high respect for the Buddha. And so because of that great respect, because of that great gratitude, he studied the way of non-harmlessness, of harmlessness to achieve peace. This is the man that is responsible to give India its freedom from the British colonial rule without a war, without the loss of lives of many millions of people. Because he was respecting and he had gratitude for a wise being such as the Buddha. He took the mindful step to investigate, to study, and continued forth with that energy to master the knowledge. And as a result, he benefited the 1.3 billion people in India right now. And many world leaders still hold Gandhi up there, his methods of leadership, as one of the best methods, because it was able to bring freedom to a country, to the people of the country of India, without any war. And to this day, even if you go to India, and even not India, the whole world respects Gandhi. Think about that. Here's another example, a bit odd. People probably gonna scream at me from the online world saying, why am I comparing Elon Musk to Dalai Lama? There are similarities, as I said before, and to every great man, woman as well, who benefit humanity have similar values, similar traits, similar attributes. We know the Dalai Lama. He is truly a student or a disciple of the Buddha. His reputation is worldly, world-renowned. His teaching commands respect because it makes people, it changes people's lives, it makes their lives better. Elon Musk, does he respect the Buddha? I don't know. I don't think so. Haven't heard him talk about it, but I'm pretty sure he respected Steve Jobs. He was inspired by Steve Jobs. He may not say it. What's the evidence out there? There are evidence out there that point to me that Elon Musk had a great respect for Steve Jobs. Let me, I can't show you any video, but let me take you on a journey, a visual journey, what the German called the Gedanken, a thought experiment. Okay, maybe not a thought experiment, but a journey. Have anybody ever seen how Elon Musk, Tesla company, present his new cars? A car is not like the size of a phone, right? But the way Elon Musk present his car, every time he released a car, it's like the way Steve Jobs present a small iPhone or a small iPad on a stage. Ever noticed? Right? So clearly, that's the evidence that Elon Musk was inspired, had great respect for Steve Jobs. Is Elon Musk, our companies, Tesla, SpaceX, Neuralink, the Boring Company, Solar City, are they bettering the quality of human life? Elon Musk have very similar traits to Steve Jobs as well. In fact, many of the qualities of Elon Musk and Steve Jobs are common to the qualities of Siddhartha Gautama or the Buddha. So out of that respect for Steve Jobs, Elon Musk is able to build 4 or 5 world-changing companies that no world CEO can do right now. See, I'm running parallel here. There are men who follow the Buddhist path, and there are men who live in the lay world, have very similar qualities to the Buddha, and they achieve greatness.